If you're new here, welcome. I'm Tangi, the Feel Good Expert. You're about to watch a full lesson from my signature course, Think Like a Reader, where I teach human design enthusiasts how to think like a professional chart reader and apply human design with confidence. I created this curriculum after nearly a decade of reading charts and teaching students, specifically to address where people tend to get stuck when learning how to interpret this complex system. It was originally developed as a paid program, and I am now releasing it publicly, lesson by lesson, for free here on YouTube. If you are following along with the course, make sure you subscribe so you are notified as each weekly lesson drops. And now let's get into today's lesson. This month, we are talking about the energy centers in human design. And I personally believe the energy centers are an excellent foundation for beginning your practice readings. It's a great place to look at what is consistent in someone's chart, where they may have conditioning, where they may have not self patterns. But it all begins with understanding the themes of each energy center, which are highly influenced by the Hindu Brahman Chakra system. So in this lesson, we're going to talk about each energy center, what it means to be defined versus undefined. We're also going to go through the biological components of each energy center and the shadow and the light of each energy center. I'll do a subsequent lesson after this one that talks about the functions of the energy centers, which is another layer of knowledge. And then I'll also do a few sample readings from some of the members of the group, just anonymously, randomly putting up charts, looking only at the energy centers and speaking to what it may feel like in that aura or in that energy to have a center defined, undefined, or fully open. So let's dive right in. The first slide here, we have all 9 energy centers. So at the very bottom, we're starting with the root center. Right above that, we have the sacral. To the right of it, the solar plexus. On the other side, on the left, we have the spleen. There's the ego center, the smallest triangle, the G center right in the middle. Above that, the throat, the ajna, and the crown. So that's all 9 energy centers. And when you're looking at a chart, if an energy center is colored in, that is considered defined, not closed, but defined. And defined energy centers are designed for creating energy. So anytime you see a defined energy center in a chart, you know immediately that that energy originates internally and then radiates externally. That's what we mean by absorbing and amplifying energy. The person with the definition is the person that's creating the energy. If you have definition in a specific energy center, you can know that that energy is consistent and reliable for you. You create energy for yourself from that center, and then that energy extends outside of your body, influencing those around you. These centers are typically gifts that you may be taking for granted. Because it's defined, it always has been, it always will be. No transit can take away your definition. Transits and relationships and environments only layer on top of your definition. So this is how you always feel. And again, you take it for granted until you put the language and the context to understanding what is defined in your chart. It's also important to note that your definition is what creates the shape and expression of your aura, so that your human design type is directly informed by what's colored in your chart. Undefined centers in a human design chart are the ones that are colored white. They would be fully open if they had 0 activation. So if there is any activation in a white center, meaning any gate is colored in, that's when we would consider it undefined. If there are no activations, then it's an open center. Similar energy though, it's just how much that energy is amplified depends on how many activations you see, which I'll talk a little bit more about at the end of this presentation and give you a few examples. So undefined and open energy centers are designed for sampling energy. If you think about the theme for a reflector, if you've heard it before, their signature theme is surprise and their not self theme is disappointment. This applies to any open or undefined center. You're not meant to create consistency here. You're meant to be fluid, to be open, to experience the entire spectrum of energy, be surprised by what comes in, but not attached to any specific outcome. So the energy in these centers, as you experience it, will originate externally and amplify internally. So you're absorbing and amplifying energy from outside of your aura in your open and undefined centers. This also creates the importance for boundaries and the themes of those centers. The energy will come and go. These centers are not intended to be relied upon for any level of consistency at all. Again, that will only lead you into a feeling of disappointment. Never place your value on the themes of the white centers. You are playing with this energy. You would consider it more like a playground, surprise, and delight. When it goes away, release it. So you may experience that energy via relationship, environment, or transit. It's fun and it's exciting while it's here, but we have to be able to let it go and not try to force consistency in the themes of those centers. These are the centers of your greatest expansion, though, and also your greatest surrender. So when you do surrender to existing on the spectrum of that energy, now you get to be surprised, you get to be fun, you get to be playful in the themes of those centers, and you get to create a great and vast amount of wisdom in the themes of those centers. So let's go through those centers one by one. We're going to start with the crown center. The theme of this energy center is to know. And again, we'll talk about the functions of each center in the next lesson, but this is a pressure center. So it creates the pressure to know. In its highest form, whether defined or undefined, it's going to create inspiration, questions, and the ability to challenge the status quo. In the shadow, a misaligned crown center will create pressure to know and the endless search for something inspiring. About 30% of the population has a defined crown, 70% undefined. I knew what I was saying there. 70% undefined. So the majority of people that you come across are going to have that undefined crown, and they're going to be on the search for something inspiring or some level of clarity. The crown governs the pineal gland in human biology. So with a defined crown, the reminder is that this center creates pressure and it creates inspiration, which means that energy is amplifying and radiating outside. A defined crown is not meant to use all of that pressurized energy and to push inward and to try to solve its own problems. A defined crown is meant to create inspiration or inspiring moments for others. The undefined crown is meant to absorb and amplify inspiration. When inspiration comes in, we enjoy it. And when inspiration is gone, we let it go. Defined crown creates the pressure to know. An undefined crown absorbs and amplifies the pressure to know. So the question that you would ask with this crown center, defined or undefined, would be, why do I find this to be particularly inspiring? The Ajna center, the theme of this one is conceptualization. It's an awareness center, okay? So it's different than a pressure center. It is creating cognitive awareness. It's creating judgment. It's creating the awareness that there are two sides to each coin, that there is bias, that there are different ways of perceiving things. So in the light form, it holds opinions, perspectives, points of view. The misaligned or the shadow side will harbor bias, partisanship, and intolerance for others' perspectives. So we're almost 50-50 on the stats here, 47% defined, 53% undefined, and it governs the pituitary glands and the neocortex. So an undefined ajna is going to be very open-minded and fluid about perspectives and points of view. It's meant to not nail down on picking a side or being very judgmental or harsh on what is correct or what is incorrect, what is good, what is bad, what is right, or what is wrong. When you try to hold on to that very tightly, it will feel misaligned in your body if you have an open or undefined ajna. The defined ajna is here to create perspectives and points of view. So a defined ajna will automatically create shifts in perspective for those that it's nearest, for those that are in its aura. So just by challenging the status quo, by challenging perspectives and points of view, by being curious about the different ways of seeing things, it will be able to create shifts in others. but not necessarily by anything that you say or any way that you try to convince others. It's simply via definition, it's via the aura. So you don't really have to think super hard about it. You don't have to nail down any specific perspective, point of view, or way of thinking. It's more having the awareness of what you create versus what you absorb and amplify. So reminder, defined ajna creates awareness of concepts, and an undefined ajna absorbs and amplifies awareness of concepts. So the question here would be, what's my perception or what's my point of view? This is a great question to ask when setting boundaries or being able to be curious about your open-mindedness or someone else's. Quick note before we continue, if you are watching this and realizing you want to go deeper or move faster, this entire course is already available inside my Chart Readers Hub, along with live calls, past masterclass replays, and an active reader community. You'll find the link in the description below. The next center here we have is the throat. The theme of this energy center is expression. It is our only manifestation center in human design. So the light of this energy center creates impulse, action, and communication. The shadow, a misaligned throat, will create some urgency to speak, attention-seeking behaviors, and unwanted manifestation by not having clear intentions around expression and maybe expressing a lot of things that are negative or unwanted outwardly. About 72% of people have a defined throat, and we've got 28% undefined. Naturally, the defined throat or the undefined throat biology is governed by the throat, the parathyroid, and the thyroid. So if you bump into clients who may have had problems related to this energy or this biology, you might question where they feel like they couldn't share their truth, for example, or where they feel like they needed to get more attention. A defined throat will consistently create expression. It will consistently manifest, particularly via whatever energy center it's connected to. If it's connected to a motor center, we're automatically going to have a manifestor or a manifesting generator. But if there's a defined throat and it's connected to one of the awareness centers, you have the potential to be a different type. So defined throat is consistently creating, consistently manifesting via what it expresses. So very important to be intentional about the words that you use and what you want to create or desire to create. The undefined throat is going to speak with some level of spontaneity. They're going to be surprised by what they end up saying. They're going to be surprised by what ends up manifesting in their experience, in their lived experience. And so an undefined throat is not meant to put so much focus, so much pressure, so much control over how they express themselves and what they manifest into their experience. It's more an energy of surrender with an undefined throat, which is the rare statistic. So reminder, defined throat creates manifestation of expression. Undefined throat absorbs and amplifies manifestation of expression. So the question here would be, what am I expressing and manifesting? The G center, the theme of this energy center is direction. It is our only identity center in human design. So the light of this center creates a sense of identity, direction, love, and purpose. The shadow here, misaligned G center, will create loss of identity and or direction and a denial of self-love. About 57% of people have it defined, 43% undefined, and it's going to govern the liver and the blood. So with the defined G center, there is a certain level of consistency in identity, direction, and purpose. Many times when you meet with clients, they may disagree. If they have a defined G center and they'll say, no, I don't know where I'm going, or I don't know what I'm doing. But when you question a little further, it's either the case that they have been conditioned to believe that the path that they would have chosen was wrong. They have been conditioned to believe that who or what they love is wrong, or they have been conditioned to believe that their identity is wrong. We have a lot of pressure societally around love, direction, and purpose. And so when you dig a little deeper, you'll find that there's something that they have always loved, or some identity that they've always resonated with, or a purpose that they feel very passionate about, but there may be conditioning at play that tells them that that's not the correct thing to be or the correct way to be, and it feels very uncomfortable. So giving permission to say your identity is correct, your purpose, your direction is correct. The undefined G center you'll find them in an endless search for direction and purpose and identity, and that is not self. For the undefined G center, they're meant to be a lot more playful around who they show up as year over year, day after day, where they find themselves, where they end up, the direction that they end up going, the purpose that they take on in life. It's all very playful and surprising to an undefined G center. So when they come into the call and they say, nobody loves me, who's going to love me? Where is all of this going? Maybe I can find my identity through the right relationship. You say, no, it's okay to have many, many shifts in your lifetime. It's okay to take on many identities. It's okay to try out different careers and change as your life progresses, as you expand and change through life. So defined G center creates identity via direction. Undefined G center absorbs and amplifies identity via direction. So the question that the G center is always asking is, where is this going? And does this align with who I am and what I love? Next up, we have the ego center. The theme of this center is motivation, and this is a motor center. So that means it provides motorized energy for willpower and motivation. The light of this energy center, it creates willpower, motivation, and the drive to provide for the tribe specifically and prove that it's the best. The shadow here, or a misaligned ego center, will create competitiveness and confusion around worthiness and value. So you've got about 37% defined and the majority of the population undefined. So many, many people working very hard to muster all of their willpower and motivation to prove their value and worthiness. The ego center governs the heart itself, the stomach, the thymus gland, and the gallbladder. And with a defined ego center, the challenge is to make promises that you can keep. Make promises to yourself and to others that you can keep. That is what creates a strong and healthy heart center or ego center. It wants to compete. It wants to prove that it's the best. It wants to use up that willpower and motivation. With an undefined ego center, it's nothing to prove. It's to be able to show up in value and worthiness with absolutely nothing to prove. So not getting into the black hole, the bottomless pit of always trying to prove your value in relationships, to be a better wife, to be a better mother, to be a better father, to be a better cousin. It doesn't matter. You need to be able to show up with the energy of nothing to prove and to hold on to that belief that your external appearance and your material possessions don't actually create any value or worth in your real lived experience. So to get in touch with that very heart-centered energy in your body. Again, a lot of times I'll bump into people who have a defined ego and they're like, I don't know, I don't really keep promises, or I'm not really very competitive. And many times, because this is a motor center, because it's motorized energy, they have an anchor. They know when enough is enough. They know when to compete and when not to compete. And so you'll see more of that energy in an undefined ego. They'll really go out of their way to try to prove themselves, whereas a defined ego knows what's worth it and what isn't. So defined ego center creates the energy behind motivations. An undefined ego center absorbs and amplifies the energy behind motivations. The question that this energy center is always asking is my heart in this? Next up, we have the spleen center. The theme of this energy center is instinct, and it is an awareness center. So it's not a motor. It doesn't do, it doesn't perform. It's not a yes or no. It is an instinctual awareness in the moment. The spleen holds awareness and attunement to fear, survival, intuition, and a general sense of well-being. The shadow of the spleen center, or a misaligned spleen center, will hold anxiety and an imbalanced focus on the past or the future. About half of people, again, 55% defined and 45% undefined. The spleen is going to govern the entire immune system and the lymphatic system of which the physical spleen is a part of. So when you have someone with a defined spleen, the challenge is to learn to trust yourself, your body, your intuitive nature. When you have someone with an undefined spleen, the reminder is to not hold on to things that are not good for you for too long, to be able to go about your life and be surprised by what comes around in the present moment. The defined spleen creates instinctual awareness. The undefined spleen absorbs and amplifies instinctual awareness. So the question that the spleen is always asking is this safe for me? Is this good for me? Next, we have the solar plexus center. The theme of this energy center is emotion. It is both a motor center and an awareness center. So it creates emotional awareness, and it also creates the motorized energy for depth and thoroughness. The light of this center, it creates emotional intelligence and the drive to experience a depth of feeling. The shadow here, or the misalignment, would be disempowering narratives around emotions or how you feel, or around contrast and the challenges that we face in life. So 53% defined and 47% undefined. The solar plexus is going to govern the kidneys, the pancreas, the bladder, lungs, and nervous system. So when you have someone who has a defined solar plexus, that will automatically be their authority in their chart. And so the reminder is to make decisions that allow them to take up space, that allow them to take the time it takes, and to be very clear about their boundaries and how long it takes them to really apply their full depth and thoroughness to any opportunity. The undefined solar plexus center, non-emotional, meaning unpredictable emotions. So the reminder here is to not try to predict or control emotions, because you'll continually find your not enoughness there. So defined creates emotional awareness and energy. Undefined absorbs and amplifies emotional awareness and energy. So the question that we ask here is, what is the purpose of this contrast? Next up, we have the sacral center. The theme of this energy center is productivity. What can we create? What can we produce? It is a motor, so it creates energy for that. The sacral creates passion, drive, energy, and excitement. In misalignment, it will create the necessity to produce without discernment. About 66% of people will have a defined sacral and 34% undefined. And the sacral center is going to govern the reproductive system and the gut. So really holding a lot of our desires, our excitement, our energy, and our enthusiasm. And so the defined sacral, a lot of times this will end up being their authority, but at the very least, it's going to be their strategy if you have a generator or a manifesting generator with a defined sacral. So the reminder is to wait to respond, wait until a person, place, or thing comes into your aura, and then check in with your gut to see if putting your energy there will be satisfying. An undefined sacral, the reminder is always going to be to not place value on productivity, because it is a very strong trap that we live in with societally, with the majority of people having a defined sacral. So defined creates the energy to produce or reproduce. Undefined absorbs and amplifies the energy to produce or reproduce. Does this bring me satisfaction or give me life? Is the question that the sacral is always asking. Lastly, we have the root center. The root is creating momentum and direction forward. It's a motor center and a pressure center. It creates energy and adrenalized pressure to move things forward, because as you can see, it governs the adrenal glands. The misaligned root center will create stress and restlessness. 60% of people have it defined, 40% of people undefined. And so the important reminder here is the root is a pressure and a motor, and it works in a pulse. It's not always on. So when you have a defined root, you have to trust that you'll always get that root pulse that will propel you forward. When you have an undefined root, the reminder is to not be so strict or so adherent to deadlines and timelines, and to not create harsh narratives around procrastination and what you move forward or what you get done in a day. So the defined center creates the pressure and energy to move forward. This undefined center, this undefined root, absorbs and amplifies pressure and energy to move forward. So a great question here is, what's the first step or what's the next step? And the very last thing I'll touch on here is when you do glance at a body graph and the energy centers, you'll be able to see how active it is based on how many activations are happening. So this is what I meant by a fully open center. You see the energy center here with no activations, and it's also undefined. We have an undefined center with multiple activations, so it's a little bit more active. We have a defined center with multiple activations, so extra active. You can also have a defined center with only one activation, so that energy is being created, but it's anchored in just that one theme. So the next lesson is going to be on the functions of each energy center, so we'll cover that in a little more depth. So thank you so much for listening, and hopefully this helps. Feel free to comment with any follow-up questions that you may have. On the screen, you'll see the lessons I recommend watching next based on your learning path. If something in this lesson shifted the way you're thinking, I'd love to hear what stood out to you most. You can share that in the comments. Liking the video and subscribing helps this course continue reaching the people it's meant for, and the questions subscribers ask here often shape what I teach next. Lastly, if you want to study this work inside a live reader community, you'll find Chart Readers Hub is linked in the description.